congratulations, along with short stories, let me take this off, that have been nominated for too many awards to mention. He uses his knowledge of African-American history as the fertile ground for speculation. While he doesn't shy away from traumas and injustices, he also finds the humor, complexity, and wholeness in characters who have been historically flattened, ignored, and caricatured by enduring racism. All of a sudden that word just didn't make sense to me anymore. In a 2021 interview with Transfer Orbit, Djèlí explains the power of speculative fiction, stating, "For any people who are marginalized, ever since you were a kid, you've always been like, what if? What if it happened this way? Or what if slavery didn't happen? Or what if Haiti had more power? Or what if there was a way to thwart colonialism?" That's just something in your head as a marginalized person. The what ifs in Djèlí's writing are an invitation to imagine ways to defeat our monsters, to wrest power back into our own hands, to make change. Djèlí is well aware of the way speculative fiction can be problematic, hello Lovecraft, but that doesn't deter him. He observes that when we're fortunate enough to get the chance to flip the script, to use those same tentacles to tell stories from different perspectives, we take it. We are so grateful that Djèlí takes those chances and flips those scripts. Friends, please join me in welcoming P. Djèlí Clark.
Hello, everyone. Everybody good today? Everybody can hear me well? Good. Okay, first of all, thank you for that introduction. I'm used to getting introductions and it's just a thing that's on my author site, but that was brand new. That was completely different, new, and created. I want a copy of that before I leave, please. That was amazing. You are a writer. That was pretty amazing. So hello, everyone. Glad to be here. This is my first time to Seattle. So I'm glad to be in the city. You know, when you're in Connecticut on the other side of the world, Seattle is this mysterious place that you hear about, but now I can see it. You guys are real, it does exist. And I can go back home and tell everyone, no, this is a real place. It's not fantastic and made up. There is a place called Seattle. So I guess today I'm going to do reading, and I was trying to figure out what I should read from. And since, you know, like just pointed out, this just won a Locus Award. So I think I will read from this work, Master of Djinn. Master of Djinn is my debut novel. I wrote a lot of novellas that got published, but this was my first chance at writing a novel. I am very happy that it's been so well received. This novel was written in a lot of different places. When you are busy as an academic, you take whatever time you can. So this novel was written between New England, hotels in Barbados, a hotel on a rooftop in Havana, watching storms take place over the ocean and thinking of Djinn and other things. And so it was written in all these disparate places, thought up in many ways in a visit to Spain. And so it was like a worldly book that came together finally and got published. So I'm going to read today, and I'm going to start off from chapter 2. Because this begins my story in earnest, where we are introduced to the dapper suit-wearing Fatma. So with that said, let me begin. Fatma leaned forward, puffing on her hookah. The ma'asal was a blend of pungent tobacco, soaked in honey and molasses, with hints of herbs, nuts, and fruit. But there was another taste, sweet to the point of sickly that tickled the tongue, magic. It made the fine hairs along the nape of her neck tingle. The small crowd that had gathered watched her expectantly. A big-nosed man in a white turban leaned so close over her shoulder she could smell the soot that covered him, an iron worker by the stink of it. He shushed a companion, which only made others grumble. From the corner of her eye, she caught Khalid giving both men a withering glare, his broad face drawing tight. Never a good idea to upset the bookie. Like most, they'd probably wagered on her opponent, who sat across the octagonal table. All of 17, she guessed, with a face even more boyish than her own. But he had already bested men twice his age. More important, he was a he, which still counted weight even in Cairo's flaunted modernity, which explained a smile on his dark lips. Some more traditional Iowa still didn't cater to women, especially where hookahs were smoked, which was most. But this seedy den, tucked into a disreputable back alley, didn't care who it served. Still, Fatma could count the women on one hand. Most left gambling to the men. 3 sitting at a far-off table in the dim room were unmistakably 40 leopards in garish bright red kaftans and hijab with blue Turkish trousers. From their disdainful looks, you'd think them wealthy socialites, not the most notorious thieving gang in the city. Fatma filtered everyone out, gambling men, smug boys, and haughty lady thieves alike, fixing on the water bubbling in the hookah's bulbous vase. She imagined it a flowing river, real enough to wet her fingertips as she inhaled its scent. Taking a long pull from the wooden pipe, she let the enchanted ma'asal work through her before exhaling a thick column. It didn't look like regular smoke, more silver than gray. Didn't move like smoke either, knitting together instead of dissipating. It took some seconds to coalesce, but when it did, Fatma couldn't help feeling a bit of triumph. A vaporous river snaked across the air as a felucca sailed its surface, the triangular lateen sail stretched taut and leaving ripples in its wake. Every eye in the coffee shop followed the ethereal vessel. Even the 40 leopards looked on in wonder. Across the table, her challenger's smile gave way to open-mouthed astonishment. When the magic was spent and the smoke cleared, he shook his head, setting down the tube of his water pipe in defeat. The crowd roared. Fatma sat back to praises as Khalid stood to collect up his money. Enchanted Ma'asal was a banned substance, a slapdash of sorcery and alchemical compounds that mimicked a drug. The addicted traded away their lives chasing the next great conjuration. Luckily, a milder form had been popular back at the Women's College at Luxor, and as a student, she'd taken part in a duel or 2, or 3, maybe more. Ya salam, the kid called. Shadia, you're as good as the usta claimed. Al-Usta was Khalid's nickname. The old Turkish title was addressed to drivers, laborers, mechanics, or craftsmen, anyone really who was very good at what they did. She was sure Khalid had never done an honest day's work in his life, but when it came to handling bets, there was none better. One of the best, I tell you, the bookie added, sitting to count through a wad of bills. Khalid had come up with that name, Shadia. The big man was her guide into the seedier side of Cairo, where Fatma El-Sharawi, special investigator with the Egyptian Ministry of Alchemy, Enchantments, and Supernatural Entities, would draw unwanted attention. Wahali, the kids exclaimed, never seen a conjuring so real. What's your secret, eh? The secret was what any first year picked up in lessons on mental alchemical manipulation. Choose real experiences over imagined ones. Hers had been an uncle's boat she'd sailed dozens of times. As Khalid, the usta, said, I'm one of the best. The kid snorted. Wouldn't have figured it. He tilted a chin at her suit, an all-white number with a matching vest that looked sublime on her russet brown skin. Fatma ran fingers down the length of a gold tie, certain to show off the glittering cufflinks on her dark blue shirt. Jealous? The kid snorted again, folding arms over a tan kaftan. Yeah, definitely jealous. How about you give me what I came for and I'll send you to my tailor? Gamal, Khalid said, let's get on with business. Shadia's been patient enough. More than patient. That trait wasn't her strong suit, but undercover work demanded it. Thieves were inherently distrustful, and only some penchant for their vices ever put them at ease. She's checked at a golden pocket watch fashioned as an antique astrolabe. 10:30. Night's not getting any younger. The kid cocked his head. What do you say, Saeed? Shadia looked like a business partner? Gamal's companion, who sat beside him, stopped chewing his nails long enough to mutter, "Let's be done with it, okay?" The lanky youth looked even younger than Gamal, with jutting ears and a halo of coiled hair. His eyes never met Fatma's, and she hoped it was because of the persona she worked to project, a young socialite willing to pay heavily for pilfered goods. "And let's go somewhere private," Khalid offered. He gestured to a back room and rose to go. Fatma smoothed back her mop of cropped black curls before putting on a black bowler, preparing to stand. She stopped halfway, noticing neither young man had moved. "No," Gamal said. Saeed looked as perplexed as they did. "No?" The way the big man stretched out the word should have cowed anyone, but not the kid. "Well, wander off to secret places and you give people ideas. Maybe come up on one of us on our way out and try to find what that secret is. We can conduct our business right here. What's the big deal? Wally, no one's even paying any of us in mind." Fatma was certain everyone was paying them every bit of mind. In a place like this, you grew eyes in the back of your head, the sides, and the top. Still, kid had a point. She met Khalid's questioning gaze. He looked ready to snatch the kid bodily out of the chair. But as entertaining as that might be, probably best not to create a scene. She lowered back into her seat. Khalid sighed, doing the same. "So, let's see it then," Fatma demanded. Saeed unslung a brown satchel from his shoulder and set it on the table. As he reached inside, Fatma found her hand gripping the lion-headed pommel of her cane. Patience. "Wait." Gamal put out a restraining hand. "Let's see the money." Fatma gripped tighter. This kid was becoming annoying. "That isn't how we conduct business," Khalid chided. "It's how I conduct it, uncle." His eyes fixed on Fatma. "You have it?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she met his gaze until some of his bravado wilted. Only then did she reach into her jacket to pull out a roll of banknotes. The blue-green paper affixed with the royal seal glittered in the kid's eyes, and he licked his lips before nodding. Saeed looked relieved and drew out an object from the satchel. Fatma's breath caught. It looked like a bottle, made of metal instead of glass, with a pear-shaped bottom inlaid with flowering gold designs that ran up a long neck. Its surface was tarnished, a dull bronze, but she guessed it was brass. "It's old," Saeed noted, fingers tracing the engravings. "I'm thinking maybe from the Abbasids. That's at least 1,000 years." Good eye. So under that nervous gaze was a scholar. "We found it fishing. I was thinking it was meant to hold perfume or used by early alchemists, but this," his hand went to a stopper at the bottle's top, running along a jade ceramic seal engraved with a dragon. "Never seen its like before. Chinese, maybe? Tang? Don't recognize the writing either. And the wax is fresh, like it was just put on yesterday. You haven't removed any of it, have you?" Fatma cut in. The sharpness in her tone sent his eyes wide. "Mr. Khalid told us not to, that the seal intact was part of the sale." "Glad you listened, or you might have wasted all our time." "Aywa," Gamal sighed. "What I want to know is what's so special about it. Saeed and I find lots of junk. Every day, Walawi. Everything people throw into the Nile comes up again. We sell them to rich people like you, but no one's ever offered us so much. I've heard other things." "Gamal," Saeed cut in, "it's not the time to start that again." "I think it's a fine time," Gamal replied, eyes fixed on Fatma. "My old Seti used to tell me stories of jinn, imprisoned in bottles, being thrown into the sea, long before Al-Jahiz brought them back into the world. She said fishermen would sometimes find them, and when they freed the jinn, it would grant their greatest wishes, Walawi. 3 wishes. It could make you a king or the richest man in the world." "Do I look like your old Seti?" Fatma asked. But this time, the kid's bravado didn't waver. "No deal," he said suddenly. Grabbing the bottle, he pushed it back into the satchel. In her mind, Fatma howled. Saeed looked flummoxed. "Ya Allah, what are you doing? We need that money." Gamal made a chiding sound. Walawi, you're only smart with books. Think if this is what I believe it is, what she believes it is. We could use it ourselves. Ask for money to rain from the skies or turn a whole pyramid to gold. The two of you are making a mistake, Khalid warned. His dark face was like a storm, and the white hair that surrounded it bristling clouds. Take this deal and go your own way. By the merciful, it isn't wise. It isn't wise, Gamal mocked. Are you a sheikh now? Going to start reading hadith? You don't frighten us, old man. So eager to take the bottle off us when we came to you. Then when we refused, you were even more eager to set up this deal. The two of you in this together, thinking to cheat us? Best be careful. Might use one of our wishes on you, Ali. Fatma had heard enough. Should have known the kid wouldn't be an honest breaker. Not with all the wahalis he threw around. Anybody who swore to God that habitually couldn't be trusted. So much for doing this the easy way. Reaching back into her jacket, she drew out a bit of silver and placed it flat onto the table. The old ministry identification had been a set of bulky papers within a fixed daguerreotype. They'd switched to this badge in the past year with an alchemical photograph melded to the metal. Blowing her cover hadn't been her first plan, but watching the brashness drain from Gamal's face was worth it. You're with the ministry? Saeed croaked. Pretty hard to get one of these otherwise, she replied. It's a trick, Gamal stammered. There aren't any women in the ministry. Khalid sighed. You two really need to read the papers more. Gamal shook his head. I don't believe it. You're not Khalas, Fatma hissed, leaning forward. It's over. Here's what you need to know. There are 4 other agents in this room. See the man at the door? She didn't bother to turn as the two peered over her shoulder. There's another talking everyone's ear off at the table to your right. And a third enjoying his hookah and watching a game of tawla on your left. The fourth, I won't even tell you where he is. Their heads swiveled about like meerkats. Saeed visibly trembled. So here's what happens now. You hand over the bottle. I give you half of what we agreed on, half, for making this difficult. And I won't haul you in for questioning. We have a deal? Saeed nodded so quickly his ears flapped. Gamal was another matter. Shaken, but not broken. His eyes darted from her to the badge and the satchel and back. When his jaws tightened, she cursed inwardly. Not a good sign. An explosion of movement, the kid flipped the table over. Khalid went sprawling, his chair tipped out from under him. Fatma caught herself before falling, stumbling back. Gamal stood with the bottle in one hand and a small knife in the other. So much for not making a scene. Now I make the deals. Let us out of here, or I break the seal and see what happens. Gamal, Saeed protested. We can just go. We don't have to. Don't be stupid. She's not going to let us go. They'll take us into our families, and our families will never hear us from us again, experiment on us, or feed us to ghouls. Fatma frowned. People had very strange ideas about what went on at the ministry. You don't know what you're doing, and you're not leaving here. Not with that. Now hand it over. Last time I'm going to ask. Something on Gamal's face snapped. Snarling through clenched teeth, he drew the blade across the wax seal, which broke and fell away. There was a moment of stillness. The entire Iowa turned at the stare at the commotion, but their eyes were no longer on the small woman in a white Westerner suit. The big man they knew to be a local bookie picking himself up off the floor, or the 2 young men standing behind an overturned table. Instead, they stared open-mouthed at what one of the young men held, an old antique bottle pouring out bright green smoke, like enchanted ma'asal, but in a greater amounts. It formed something that looked more solid than any illusion. When the vapor vanished, a living, breathing giant was left in its wake, with skin covered in emerald scales and a head crowned by smooth ivory horns that curved up to brush the ceiling. He wore nothing but billowy white trousers held up by a broad gold belt. His massive chest swelled and retracted as he took deep breaths before opening his 3 eyes, each burning like small, bright stars. Even in the world left behind by Al-Jahiz, it wasn't every day he saw a married jinn simply appear. The exact scenario Fatma had tried so hard to prevent was now playing out right before her. She allowed a momentary wave of panic, before finding her resolve again. Don't move. Let me talk. No, Gamal shouted. He's ours. You can't have him. He doesn't belong to, but the kid was already brandishing the emptied bottle at the djinn. Hey, you, look at me. I'm the one who freed you. The Marid, who had been silently gazing across the room, turned his fiery gaze. That should have been enough. That should have been enough to make anyone cower. But the kid, quite stupidly, stood his ground. That's right. We freed you, Saeed and me. You owe us now 3 wishes. The Marid stared at the two, then uttered one word that rumbled and echoed. Free. He formed the word again between lips, surrounded by a curling white beard. Free. 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 Then he laughed, a low bellowing that set Fatma's teeth on edge. It has been ages since I have needed to utter this mortal tongue, but I remember what free means: to be unbound, to be not fastened or confined. His face contorted into something terrible, but I was not bound or fastened or confined. No one imprisoned me. I slumbered at my own choosing, and you woke me, unbidden, unasked, undesired, so that I would grant you wishes. Very well, I will grant you only one wish. You must choose. Choose how you will die. That was about enough. People jumped up from chairs and tables and made hasty runs to the exit. Even the serving staff joined the stampede. The Iwa's owner disappeared into a closet, locking the door behind him. In moments, the place had emptied, leaving behind Fatma, Khalid, 2 young men, and one very ill-tempered Marid. Gamal looked staggered, Saeed ready to faint. Fatma shook her head. This was precisely why you didn't go around opening up mystical bottles. Why was that so hard for people to understand? Well, time to earn her pay. Oh, great one, she called. I would petition for these 2 who have wronged you. The Marid turned his horned head, that fiery gray gaze scrutinizing her. You have been in the company of other jinn. His sharp nose inhaled and wrinkled in distaste. Among other creatures. Are you a mortal enchantress? Not an enchantress. Dealing with magic is just in my line of work. The Marid seemed to accept that answer, or he didn't care. You seek parley on behalf of these 2. A clawed hand waved at Gamal and Saeed. Fools. Fatma bit back a smile. Yes, old one, the 2 fools. She spared a direct glance at Gamal. Surely you are magnanimous enough to look past any slight 2 stupid children could offer one so powerful and wise. The Marid ground his sharp teeth. The dissembling flattery of mortals. That I also remember. Do you know why I bound myself to slumber, not enchantress? Because I grew tired of your kind. Greedy, selfish, ever seeking to satisfy your wants. I could no longer stomach the sight of you, the stink of you, your ugly little faces. I slept to escape you all in hopes that when I next awakened, you would be gone, struck down by a blessed illness, or slaughtered in one of your endless wars. Then I wouldn't have to hear your monkey-like chatter, or need speak your inarticulate tongues ever again. But here I am, and you are still here. Fatma blinked at the tirade. Of all the jinn these 2 had to go and wake up, it had to be a bigot. Right. You can go back to sleep, old one. You can sleep for as long as you like. I'll even see that your vessel is sent somewhere far away where you'll be undisturbed. Maybe the heart of a volcano, she thought idly. The Marid inspected her the way a butcher might a goat bleeding out a proposal to stay the knife. And why not, enchantress? Should I deign to make bargains when I could simply pluck your head from your neck, stain these walls with your entrails, or fill your belly with ravenous scorpions? Fatma didn't doubt those threats. Of the classes of jinn, Marid was some of the most powerful and ancient, possessing preternatural strength and formidable magic. But if this half-awake tyrant thought she'd wilt under his intimidation, he had another thing coming. Tipping back her bowler at an imperious angle, she moved closer to the towering Marid, craning her neck to meet those three burning eyes. You've been in self-exile in that bottle for at least 1,000 years, so let me catch you up. There are more of us chattering mortals than you might guess, lots more. More of your kind, too, crossed over to this world. Jinn live among us now, work with us, follow our laws. You want to smear me to a pulp? She shrugged. Go ahead, but you'll pay for it. And the people I work for, they know how to make even slumbering for eternity in a bottle extremely unpleasant. Try extending that third eye of yours. See what's become of the world while you slept. The Marid didn't react right away. Finally, he closed both his eyes, at the same time widening the third on his forehead until it flared with brilliance. When he reopened his remaining eyes, they looked startled. You speak truth. Your kind has truly multiplied, like locusts. So many more Jinn in this world, working alongside mortals, living with them, mating with, yes, all of that, Fatma cut in. Disgusting. Reality. So that brings us back to our bargaining. I'm sure you'd rather get back to sleep, wait and see how things pan out. My offer still stands. You have my word. The Marid snorted. The word of mortals. Empty and weak as water. There's no worth in that. Present me with something to bind, something that makes your offer true. My honor, then. What is mortal honor to me? You try my patience, not enchantress. Make your offer worthy or offer it not at all. Fatma gritted her teeth. Damn Jinn and their bargaining. There was one other thing she could give, though she loathed it, but her options seemed slim. To make my offer true, she said, I offer you my name. That made the Marid's eyebrows rise. Jinn were big on names. They never gave their true names, instead calling themselves by geographic locations, cities, rivers, mountain ranges, either that or majestic titles like the Queen of Magic or the Lord of Thursday. That lot were insufferable. By the look on his face, however, it seemed even mortal names held some worth. Your true name, he demanded. She bristled at this, but nodded acceptance. The offer is accepted, but there's still the matter of granting the fools their wish. Fatma started. What do you mean? We just settled on that. The Marid's dark green lips pursed into a smirk. Our arrangement, not enchantress, was your offer that I return to my vessel, and you assure me uninterrupted slumber, not that I spare the lives of these two. The wish is still binding. That was implied, but even as she said the words, Fatma knew the fault was hers. You had to be careful when bartering with Jinn. They took every word literally. Why so many of them in this age made good lawyers? She cursed her mistake and tried to think straight. So the wish still stands, she asked. What was requested will be given. But you already set the parameters. The Marid shrugged and cast a baleful glance to Gamal and Said, who shook visibly. The asker should have taken more care to specify their wants. So all they can get from this wish is death, what comes to all mortals in the end. Hardly fair, but fair usually counted for little in dealings with immortals. Her mind worked to find a solution. This Marid had lived countless lifetimes and was very good at this. But she was a ministry agent. That meant protecting people from the world of the supernatural and the magical, even when they ran stupidly headlong into it. I have a proposal, she said at last, taking care with her words. For their wish, I ask that you grant these two fools death as old men in their beds at the end of their natural lives. It was a beautiful thing to see the arrogance evaporate from the Marid's face. She expected him to protest, find some little crack in her logic, but instead he merely nodded, appraising her anew, then smile, a terrible smile. Well played, not enchantress, he pronounced, and done. A half hour later, Fatma stood wiping off her badge. Between the table flipping over and the stampeding patrons, it had ended up halfway across the room. Khalid had found it sitting in a pile of spilled charcoal ash. There weren't any other agents, were there? The big man asked, holding a cup of tea. He'd managed to coax the coffee shop's owner from the closet and convinced him to brew a pot. Fatma rotated her shoulder, feeling the slightest twinge. She'd injured it in a case this past summer. Although it had healed remarkably fast, it still flared up now and then. Good thing they didn't know that. Khalid chuckled, glancing to Kamal and Saeed, who sat dazed as black uniformed ministry agents questioned them. Good thinking on saving those two. For a while there, I thought that Marid had you. For a minute, so did I. Khalid grinned before his face turned serious. You do know what you've done, what you've granted them. Fatma had known the moment she spoke the words. Kamal and Saeed were all but guaranteed to live to old age. They'd never need worry about being killed by an automobile or falling off the ledge of a building, not even a bullet. The Marid's power would protect them for the remainder of their mortal lifetimes. I don't think they realize it yet, Khalid mused, but they'll figure it out in time. Saeed, I believe, will put it to good use. The boy really wanted the money for a trade school, though I think he'd probably be better off at university. But Gamal, that one could steal the eyeliner from your eye and still not be content. It's worse than that, she said. Their wish grants them long life, but it doesn't say how. They could live out their whole lives with a terrible disease, unable to die. Same thing if an accident leaves them in unbearable pain. Their gift could easily become a prison. Khalid slowly lowered his teacup and murmured a prayer. That was the thing a lot of people didn't understand. Magic abhorred imbalance and always exacted a price. That's where I'll end. Okay.
Thank you so much. Do y'all mind if I remove my mask while we're on the mic? We good? Cool. I got feedback last week that I was not speaking loudly and clearly enough for everyone, which is good. I need that feedback. If you have questions written down, please pass them this way. If you're still thinking through your questions, take your time. We will also be answering questions that come in from the YouTube feed.
Oh, it is YouTube feed.
Yes. Yes. And I've been assured it is working. All right, question number 1. Will you be writing more stories in the Master of Djinn universe?
Da-da-da-dum. As I always tell people, this universe started in a novelette, a story that I wrote that was supposed to be a short story to turn into a novelette called The Dead Djinn in Cairo, which was published on Tor.com in 2016. When I wrote that story, I had no idea I'd be writing anything else. I like world building, and so I tend to leave a lot of doors open, right? Because I like world building, there's always a place for me to go. I like creating stories where it feels that there must be something more behind this door. If I peel back this page, there's more to this world. And so when I wrote that first story, those elements were there naturally, but I didn't think on writing more. And then people told me they liked the story. And when you're a writer, nothing feeds the muse more than flattery. And so flattery created a second book, a second story, a novella called The Haunting of Tram Car 015. And people like that one. And I was like, it's about transportation. It's absurd. It's about candy and transportation. People were like, no, we really like it. Is there going to be more? And flattery worked on the muse again because I was certain there was not going to be anything after that novella. And next thing you know, there's a novel called The Master of Djinn. Do I plan on writing anything else after Master of Djinn? Well, it depends on how much you flatter. That's all I can say. Oh, that's my answer.
Thank you. So what is the inspiration to use Cairo your setting?
You know, there were several things. I've visited Cairo before, and it leaves an impression on you. Try crossing the street in Cairo sometime in traffic. It is you're taking your life into your own hands, because only people from there understand the mechanics and the rhythm of it. It just stuck with me, and then, you know, when it was years later when I was thinking of writing the story, and I always say this story emerged somewhere between as an adjunct professor teaching world civilization, and getting to the anti-colonial period, and as also being in grad school, where every grad student is going to have to read Edward Said's Orientalism. And somewhere between reading Edward Said's Orientalism and showing students Pontecorvo's Battle for Algiers, this story emerged as this interesting anti-colonialist narrative, but with humor. How can I make anti-colonialism funny? Is what I wanted to know. And the story emerged that way. And when I was trying to think of where am I going to set this, and there were certain, like the Olympics, there were several different places in the world I was going to set it. Cairo won. It petitioned and it won. Part of it is that Cairo is so ancient; it just has a lot of history. There's just, and this is, and I'm talking to my Clarence students. There's when you're looking for places to set things, go for the place that has a lot of information. A lot of places you can research. And, you know, because I'd been there before and I could think of the city, and it just emerged naturally as the place, and it worked. It worked wonderfully, I thought. And so, yeah, why Cairo? There you go.
It's such a romantic city.
Yeah. And it's a crossroads. I could meld so many cultures into Cairo, from, you know, there's an Armenian district, right? There's Nubian, there's Sudan next door, there's the rest of Africa, there's the Middle East. There's just so much that flows in there. There's a lot. There's, you know, there are Albanian gangs and everything. I can do a lot with Cairo, because it's such a crossroads city.
At the end of the reading, it's stated that magic has a cost.
Yeah.
So how do you determine the cost of magic for your magic systems?
I always have this notion that you have to pay the piper, right? You may want this fabulous thing and you may get it, but you owe someone, right? You're going to, nothing's free in a sense. And that's why, in some ways, that's how this world came about. Because I was looking for something to alter colonialism, right? When I was thinking of my anti-colonialism, I was like, what's going to stop the Maxim gun, right? What's going to stop the steamships that, you know, sink the Chinese junk fleets and these things? What stops the march of the industrial, what the Industrial Revolution has wrought? And the only thing I could come up with was magic, right? Something that could subvert industry in some ways. And, you know, while that happens, when I create this world isn't perfect. It's not a utopian society. It still has to deal with its problems. You still have to pay for the price of, you've unleashed this magic in the world. And so the price that you have to pay, this is why there's a bureaucracy that has to be created. Because, you know, if magic actually returned, what's the first thing people would do? We need a ministry to regulate this thing. We need rules, right? Otherwise, it's just everywhere. And so part of the centerpiece of this world is Ministry of Magic and Alchemy, and enchanted being, I can't even say the name, and entities and everything else, is that you need something to regulate this, because magic unchecked can cause havoc among mortals who are irresponsible in its use. It's not the magical beings themselves are irresponsible, it's us. Like anything else, just like, and it's my thing of also saying, just like with industrialization and anything else, we can misuse it. And so the ministry is often there to protect people from themselves. So yeah, so it's with this understanding that, yeah, there has to be balance.
That definitely comes across in the selection you read, that the ministry is there to protect people.
Yeah, if you want to play with magic, just know you got to pay. You might pay a price.
Let's take a change of course. What writers or other creators have inspired your work?
Other writers and creators. I always say, like a modern writer who I've met and I know, and who in reading her works, it really had me thinking about how to explore fantasy and thinking of just an expanded world was N.K. Jemisin. Um, when I read her Inheritance trilogy, the notion of gods being enslaved to mortals, I mean, just that whole subversion of that just blew my mind. And just the way she creates this really complex world and these enriching characters, and there's deepness in there. There's also humor, and so I think that was a great inspiration as far as a modern writer. And then there are people who I read when I was younger. Like I like humor in my works, and it's probably I love Douglas Adams, right? I read all the Hitchhiker's Guide. I love the absurdities of it, and so like my works always have a bit of jokes in it. It's like because that's me. I'm always going to joke a bit while I'm having these really serious things. I want a bit of levity, and so that's also an inspiration. Yeah. So, but I would say N.K. Jemisin is probably one of my more modern inspirations when it comes to writing.
We need to get you both in the same room. Let's keep talking about world building. Do you have favorite research sources? For example, museum collections, your own travel, digital or in-person archives?
I mean, all of the above. I mean, we do live in, it's funny, I would say we live in this world now where information is at our fingertips. And you can find so many wonderful things online. Just if you're dealing with places you haven't visited, like you're in the pandemic and you're trying to write a story, Google Maps is amazing. I can walk down streets, and visit different places using just Google Maps. I mean, it makes writing, it makes the ability to write about different places so much better. I mean, research comes from, works that have been written, sometimes reading authors from the places that I may have visited and seeing what indigenous writers in those places write about their worlds and their experiences helps. That's a form of research. Simply finding the raw research, as you said, from various archives, from museums. There are just so many places that you can find online. Google Books, if you can go to Google Books, and if the Google Books allows you, if the Google Book Gods allows you to see that one page that you want to see, but of course it's not. That one little page you want to see, it's going, that section is like, no, this is where we end it. We knew what you were looking for, ha ha ha. If you can somehow get it to give you that page, you can get great stuff. And so I do. Sometimes I go into academic things if I want to. The Library of Congress, when I was writing Ring Shout, the WPA narratives in the Library of Congress were essential for me understanding folklore. And so, yeah, there's so many different places, and that's just online. It's not like you can still go to libraries here, just take books off shelves and find things as well. And so there are a lot of different sources and places from my own visits, from resources or people who sometimes live in these spaces. I had a great sensitivity reader for a Master of Jin, which was, I mean, just really, really, really great reader. Just, we worked through a lot of things. And some people always like, should you get a sensitivity reader? Absolutely, yes. Why not? And so, yeah, all of that I think went into research.
Awesome. We have our first question from the YouTube feed. So confirmed, the YouTube feed is working.
Yay.
Thank you, Marnie and co, for all your hard work there. Can we give them a round of applause?
Yes.
All right. Morrissey writes, H-Town represent.
Yeah, that's right.
Love
Clark.
Love the New Orleans and Georgia of God of Drums and Ring Shout. Would you write a Houston story sometime?
I will say that, would I write a Houston story sometime? I grew up in Houston most of my life. That's where my parents lived. Even though I was born in New York and I lived out the country, that's where I spent most of my life. And so I've wanted to write an H-Town story visiting places that people from Houston would know, like Sharpstown Mall or McGregor Park, or, going down Alameda, or driving on the wildness that is I-45 that they're never going to stop working on. They've been working on that thing since I was a kid. Just all kinds of things, and, putting in everything there from, H-Town rappers and, old school, like Lil Kiki and others. And so I will say this, I'm saying all this for the YouTube feed for posterity. I will say working on it. And people may be surprised, but working on it.
All right, Morrissey, I hope that satisfies your
Yeah, I hope that
H2.
satisfies you.
All right, questions are starting to come in from the online feed. Marcus says, Fenderson, thank you for your dramatic reading. Could you please speak of your inspirations for creating Fatma El Sha'arawi?
Yeah.
Sha'arawi?
Yeah, Fatma.
Sorry for mispronouncing. Your self-assured main character, and thank you.
Yeah, I always wonder, like, Fatma arose. It's funny, when I started thinking of the story, there are ways that you start thinking of stories, and Fatma was just there. She was instantly there. Like, I knew this story was Fatma was going to be there. She was going to be the central figure. I literally saw her in the suit. I even knew what she was wearing. And so instantly I knew she was there, but I didn't know her yet. And I got to know her as I wrote the story. I got to know her confidence and her personality and her quirks, the things that annoys her, her drive. I got to know that as I wrote her. And they're like, her name is pulled from a well-known Egyptian feminist. So I did pull on that for her name, but her as a character, she grows. I like to think it comes from women I've known in my life, relatives I've known who some of her quirkiness and some of her ability to take control of situations, the way she's calm under fire, like giving herself that momentary, like, okay, I'm gonna panic for a second, but now I'm gonna step in and take control, right? I think all of that, I think a lot of different things came into creating her. But again, she was created in many ways as I wrote. She grew as the story grew. And I think she's grown as the stories have grown. Like the Fatma from Djèlí in Cairo, I always think is a little different from the Fatma that you see in The Master of Jinn, because she's grown in between the time.
More love for Fatma from the studio audience. Love Fatma's character, especially her fashion. I would love to know how you came up with her and if you consciously characterized her so differently from the typical detective.
Yeah, like I said, I instantly knew she was going to be in these suits. I don't know exactly why I had her in a suit. I can't tell you right away why I had her. I do know that after this, I just went looking to see, could I find women in suits in this region of the world in the early 1900s. And yes, there are entire photographs of women from Lebanon and Egypt and elsewhere wearing men's suits. And so, and for anyone who's just tells me, because I've had people tell me, are you sure that's historical? Yeah, I got the receipts, I got the proof. It's historical, thank you. And so, yeah, I instantly knew that she was going to be these suits, and I just tried to dress her to the nines. I always say, like, I can't pull off Fatma's look. I'm just her tailor, right? But I can't pull it off. And so I just like sitting there dressing and probably watching Project Runway a whole lot with my wife. And so various reasons, I like just put her in these suits. I just like mixing and matching them, and looking at like suits of like dandies and these things. And so it just came naturally. And I'll sometimes sit there like, yeah, chartreuse tie with a bit of orange mandarin, right? Like, I don't know what that would look like in real life, but she's gonna rock it because she can pull it off.
On that note, excuse me, as a historian, do you feel a particular sense of responsibility when you write alt history?
Yes and no, in a sense. As on the one hand, when I write alternate history, I instantly know that it is not history. It's not real. Once I alter the world, it's not real. One thing is not more real than the other. I've seen people get like, well, this thing is more likely to happen. Historians jump in. It doesn't matter. It's all fake, right? There is history and there's that thing you made up. However, the thing that I normally find most interesting, and I always say this is what I find most important about alternate history that I read or anything, is the period of divergence that you choose. I always say that tells me more than the world you've created, right? Like, there's a certain choice and bias we all make if we're going to do alternate history, that we choose, we want to change this. This is the point in which we want things to change. And that often says, we want people to be drawn to this issue. We want people to talk about this real thing in our history. And so I take it serious in the sense that if there's some seriousness, I take it serious in the sense that there's so many things in our real world to pull on. That I put in these works that some people may think like, oh, he just made that up. And I'm like, no, that actually happened. That's like a real thing. I've just spun a little bit of the fantastic on it, right? And there's a lot of that within these works. And so even though I understand on the one hand that I'm just making up this up, it's absurd, the historian in me can't help but trying to do a little bit of teaching, right? It can't help but putting in things that I know that are real and that I hope that people will go back and research and be like, oh, that is interesting. There was a West African mystic who was on Hajj who healed the son of one of the Egyptian bashas, right? That's fascinating, and that actually happened. And I got to put that in there. And so, and then he goes back and conquers half of West Africa and sets up an empire, right? Like that actually did happen. And so I like those histories that people may not know about that I can show off in this book, even though, yes, it's fantasy.
Marianne is watching from the Philippines, and
Hi, Marianne.
Hi, Marianne. Marianne asks, looking toward future projects, what is the one world that you've not yet built or created, but you've always wanted to? Are you going to write it?
Oh, wow. That's heavy,
Yeah,
Marianne.
yeah. The online audience does not F around.
I know. This audience is not playing around at all. Philippines represent. So, I mean, yeah, I would love to one day. I'm frightened of it, and I want to. I would love to one day write the super secondary world giant fantasy tome where like you could stack my books and open the door, keep the door open with it. I would love to create something like that in a secondary fantasy world that is at once taken from bits of our world, but so divergent that you can't exactly place it. And I'd love to do that, and I'm also frightened of ever starting it because then I'll be responsible for finishing it. And then somebody might make a whole HBO series out of it, and then I'll be like, oh my goodness, when am I going to finish it? And people will bother me, even though I want to go do other things, and then that'll become a whole thing. I don't know if you've ever heard that happen to anyone, but so that's my answer there.
You wait 8 seasons to watch Cersei get taken out by a rock.
Right. And we'll want to know, like, what's the real story, George? I mean, person who I haven't mentioned.
I'm going to throw one in. So, Ring Shout.
Yes.
Best book I read last year.
Thank you.
Welcome. And I could have Googled this, but I wanted to ask you, where do the night doctors come from? Did you invent them? Are they folkloric figures? Tell me, please.
The night doctors in Ring Shout literally come from the same place, the notion of thinking of the Klan as monsters do. They come from African-American folklore, and I came across them a long time ago doing a master's degree that was separate from my PhD, reading the Works Progress Administration, the WPA ex-slave narratives, which were basically, everybody knows their New Deal jobs programs and what have you. And this was created, part of the WPA was to go around and interview, and during the Great Depression in the 1930s, the last surviving generation of African Americans who had experienced slavery. They were all very elderly. Most of them were children during slavery, so they're trying to remember things or remember things their parents had remembered. Some of them were a little older, and part of what they also wanted to do, and they were doing this all throughout the country. Like, by the way, the Library of Congress has all of this, and if people understand like a ton of America's understanding of its own culture and folklore comes from the things that were basically recorded during this time. It's a great repository. People talking about archives. And so one of the things they would ask them about are folklore. And some of this was condescending. Some of the people who were asking them just wanted to know, like, quote unquote, Negro superstitions. And others were sometimes Black interviewers. Zora Neale Hurston was an early interviewer, and she's trying to collect folk tales and folklore. And so they would tell a lot of these folk tales. And one of them was this notion of the Klan as monsters, the first Klan, who would dress sometimes not as the way we think of the Klan. They would sometimes blacken their faces or wear horns or wear chains that they could rattle and do all of these things to terrorize people. And these ex-slaves would write about the terror and trauma that the Klan put them through, and they did it by thinking of them as monsters. And even though they knew who these people were, they understood that the Klan was like, yeah, that's Judge McAllister. I work for him, and I know who that is. But they decided to use folklore to tell these tales. The same thing happened with the night doctors. The night doctors are part of these folklore that would come across of these beings or men or people who would steal away African Americans and do experiments on them. And it's thought to have maybe, there are many ways it may have arisen. It may have arisen from during slavery, them using the bodies of deceased slaves being sent off. This is where we get actual history, being sent off for basically to medical, selling them to medical places or what have you, medical colleges and other things. And so this idea of night doctors would persist, that night doctors would snatch you away, right? They would snatch away members of the community and they would disappear. And it's interesting how the mythology goes. The night doctors after slavery kind of get melded with the Klan. And so sometimes the night doctors are the Klan, sometimes there's something different. And that ideology remains. And I always bring up Jordan Peele's Get Out, like in the opening scene where I cannot remember the name of the actor from Atlanta. Not Daniel Kaluuya, who's the main figure, but somebody say?
Yes.
Lakeith Stanfield. Thank you. Somebody gave it to me, Stanfield. Where he's in the neighborhood and he's snatched away, right? And then later at medical experiments, that's pure night doctors, right? That's that story. And so I pulled from that, and in the nature of writing it my way, I wanted to have my own interpretation. And so I took a little cosmic horror, and I decided rather than just perhaps men or what have you, I want them to be completely otherworldly, terrifying beings. And yeah, I ran with it.
Thank you. I'm a big horror guy, so I was like, oh, no, more night doctors, please.
Yeah, there is.
Aren't they coming back in Act 3?
There is a short story called Night Doctors that was published by Nightmare magazine. Interestingly, Night Doctors, I actually wrote Night Doctors before I wrote Ring Shout. And then when I was writing Ring Shout, I was like, what if I was looking around, like, what if I just bought the Night Doctors in here? I was like, can I do that? I mean, comic books cross over all the time. Can I have a book crossover? Can I take a story that I wrote and then cross it over? No, there are rules. Somebody will come get me. And then I decided, now I'm going to do it. And I did it. So think of Ring Shout is like a crossover where the Night Doctors appear. They might appear again.
Oh, I hope so. Craft question. What was it like transitioning from writing novellas to a novel? What were the challenges, the pleasant surprises, the differences?
Pleasant surprises, yeah. I always tell people, well, my secret is I'm an overwriter. And so I actually started off a long time ago writing novels that were never published, that will remain, unknown in purgatory. And so it was not so much developing a new skill as trying to remember what I'd done before and then applying what I've learned since in the many, many years, on how to do this. And so it was, there's a way that when you're writing a short story, you realize I can do so much in this short story. I can give you so much of the character. I can give you so much of the world. There's a lot more of this world, like I said before, and there are things I can peel back, but I can't peel back to show them because I only have so much space. A novella allows me to do a bit more, right? We could see about Fatma at work and the different things she does, and we could learn a bit about her. And then there's a novel. When it came to writing the novel, readers expect more. Readers want to know, where does Fatma live? I want to go to her house. People want to get in her business. I'm like, what's her mom tell? Does she talk to her mom? Like people just want to know more. And so with the novel, it was just like, okay, I've got to expand this out. I want to know more about this world. I want to know more about how you've hinted more before about Al Jahid's. I want to know more about how it works. I want to know how the ministry works. I've never been to the ministry building. It's like everybody wants to like visiting tourists who want you to take them everywhere is how I think of the novel. And so when I wrote the novel, it was like expanding more in doing so. And so it was really a lot of fun because I got to, all those layers I'd been wanting to peel back, I got to do, right? And I always tell people like, I forgot to say this. So when I wrote A Dead Gin in Cairo and I thought, oh, flattery, I might write a bit more. I was still uncertain because again, I hadn't created a timeline from this world. Like I love books and I love when people give me timelines. And so I was in Spain a year later, and I was actually in Granada visiting, seeing the Alhambra Mosque and everything else there, and pardon me, not mosque, but the various buildings. And I was like, oh wow, I'm in these Moorish, these Moorish buildings. This would be a great time to do something with Master Jin. And so one night before I went to dinner in Spain, yeah, you're in Spain, like you eat dinner like at 10:30 because it's wild, so you're just hungry. You have yourself a kana and a nice little meal before, and then you just wait. And so while I was waiting, I sat down and just like soup to nuts, I wrote the entire timeline of the world of a Master Jin. And I just did that in one night before dinner. You know, when it was just, I was hungry. And so I was just really working through it. And once I did that, it was like, okay, I have this world now. I can do more. And from there, I just started fleshing things out. And it was very essential. Now I call it, it's like my secret Bible that I have when I go back, and I used it to write the Haunting of Tramcar 015. Because literally that came about because I was like, I got a timeline now. I guess I need to write something. And I did. And then when it came to writing the novel, I had this timeline again, which was useful. So,
yeah. May you be blessed with an RPG based on your IP.
That would be something.
N.K. Jemisin got one.
Yeah, she sure did. I'm no N.K. Jemisin. So. Hi, Nora.
Were there specific steampunk tropes you were trying to engage with or push back against in this book?
Yeah, there were. I mean, it's funny. People like there were both, right? There was the steampunk stories that are always set in Victorian England. I'm like, I mean, the whole point of a Master of Jin was to like say, okay, we can be somewhere else. It doesn't always have to be top hats and monocles and what have you. But then again, I like top hats and monocles. And so the irony is, what do I put Fatma in? I put her in a classic steampunk outfit, right? And so I was both subverting the world and also giving people some of the things you like of that world, right? And so I'm glad I was able to do so. And Cairo worked so well again because it's this crossroad city. And I've had people say like, oh, why is Fatma in a Western suit? Why isn't she? I said, because it's Cairo and you can get anything in Cairo. It's a mix and blend of things. And because she wanted to, and I give you this great reason in the first story that basically she is dressing to look exotic, right? She wants to look exotic the same way Europeans would come and dress like Egyptians to look exotic. She was like, yeah, I want to wear this weird costume that Europeans wear, this suit thing. I want to look exotic, you know? So yeah.
All right, one last question, and then we will buy some books and sign some books. All right. The chapter you read takes place in a very rich setting. A lot is going on. How do you decide which details of that world to prevent in the story? How do you avoid my world, let me tell you everything?
Yeah, I always try to go with what are the things that, it's a balance between I want people to have the atmosphere and I want them to feel that they're there, but I also want to make sure that the story is centered, right? I always say I'm not doing a D&D campaign. I want to make sure that the story itself is centered and it's not completely meandering. And by the way, that opening scene is like my ode, by the way, to Indiana Jones. The first movie, if anybody can get the scene, everybody now knows it, the drinking scene. Yeah, I love the scene of like the person who like, you know, drinks somebody else under the table. And so it was just a matter of, it was also my way of introducing, if people hadn't read the other works, this is who Fatma is, this is how she solves a situation. And it was just, you know, knowing that balance of, I always try to think if I'm somewhere and I need to pay attention and I'm noticing things, but I'm not like, I'm noticing things now. I can see what people are wearing or what have you, but I don't notice everything. And so I try to keep that narrow enough so there's just enough there that, oh, well, that's interesting, but keeping things focused on the main central story. I mean, a giant Jin is going to arrive. I think that's going to suck up all the air in the room.
Fenderson, Djèlí, Clark, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Real quick, I'm going to hand it over to the library for closing remarks.
Thank you so much. That was so great. And thanks everybody. Thanks Evan for moderating the Q&A. Just a reminder, Evan mentioned U-Bookstore has copies of Fenderson's books right over to your right there. And if you're watching online, you can of course find his books at ubookstore.com and at the library, of course, as well. I just wanted to mention for folks that are getting books signed here tonight, we're going to start the signing at this silver table, which we're actually going to move a little bit more this way. And the line will kind of go that way toward where Dwayne is, but then maybe up the stairs if we need to, because this is the exit door tonight. So it's a little bit different than we often do, but that way everybody will be able to get out. And then if you're heading out, you'll need to exit through the 4th Avenue lobby because the rest of the library is closed. We're so grateful to everybody who made tonight's program possible. Thank you so much, Clarion West, for partnering with us on these. We're just so grateful to you for all of the work that you do. So hooray for everybody at Clarion. Thank you. And then thanks to our author series sponsors, the Gary and Connie Kunis Foundation, the Seattle Times, and the Seattle Public Library Foundation. And of course, thanks to everybody who's joining us tonight online and in person. We'll see you next time.